My daughter-in-law walked into our home that morning, carrying documents she wanted my wife to sign. When my wife refused, she struck her across the face at the breakfast table. I stepped between them, took her wrist, looked into her eyes, and said, "You just made the last mistake of your life." Then I pulled out my phone and sent a single word. She had no idea that one word had just activated 6 months of planning and that her world was about to collapse around her. This one stayed with me. Before we begin, drop a quick comment. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from someone else you love? Just yes or no. Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs. Quick note, some details have been fictionalized for storytelling purposes. What matters is the message at the heart of it all. I knew that in 9 hours everything would be over. I just had to survive the morning without breaking. The kitchen filled with golden California light as I sat at the table, coffee cooling in my hands, watching Iris move through our morning routine. 7:45. The house was quiet except for the soft clink of her teacup against the saucer, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of sprinklers on the back lawn. Everything normal. Everything a lie. I had spent 40 years reading rooms, closing deals, building an empire from 3 rental properties into a portfolio that spanned the West Coast. I could tell when a man was bluffing across a negotiating table from the way he touched his wedding ring. I could price a property within 5% of market value just from standing in the entryway. But nothing in 4 decades of business had prepared me for this, sitting in my own kitchen, watching my wife prepare breakfast, knowing what Conrad had confirmed last night. The lab results had come back at 11:30 p.m. I had been in my study when my phone lit up with his name. Conrad Hale, private investigator, former LAPD detective, the man I had trusted with everything for the past 6 months. His voice had been flat professional, the way it always got when the news was bad. "It's arsenic," he'd said. "Low doses administered over time. The hair sample you sent tested positive. If she keeps drinking that tea, Preston, we're looking at organ failure within 6 months." I had thanked him, hung up, sat in the dark study for 3 hours, staring at nothing, feeling the rage build like pressure behind my eyes, until I thought my skull would crack. Then I had gone upstairs, climbed into bed next to Iris, and watched her sleep until dawn. Now she stood at the counter, 65 years old, and still beautiful in the morning light. Her silver hair pulled back in the simple bun she had worn for as long as I had known her. A retired English teacher who had spent 35 years guiding teenagers through Shakespeare and Steinbeck, who still corrected my grammar at dinner parties, who had never raised her voice in anger in all our years together. She poured herself another cup of tea from the pot on the counter, the special blend Celeste had given her 3 months ago. The one she drank every morning, now the one that was killing her. "You're up early," Iris said, glancing at me with a small smile. "Couldn't sleep." "Just thinking," I said, keeping my voice level. "Watching the sunrise." She nodded, bringing her cup to the table, sitting across from me in the chair she had claimed as hers 20 years ago when we first bought this house. The $12 million estate in Pacific Palisades. The house that had started all of this. It's a beautiful morning," she said softly. "Yes," I said. "It is. 9 hours." I had to give her 9 more hours of peace. 9 more hours of not knowing, and then it would all be over. The lie would end. The danger would end. Everything would end. I watched her sip her tea, the poison tea, the tea I had been watching her drink for 3 months, while Conrad built the case, gathered the evidence, confirmed what I had suspected since June. Every morning I had sat here watching, waiting, holding everything inside, because Conrad had been clear we needed time. Time to document. Time to prove. Time to build a case so airtight that when we moved, there would be no escape. And now we had it. The lab results. The financial records. The testimony Conrad had secured from Vance Ashford Celeste's business partner, who had cracked under pressure 2 weeks ago and confirmed everything. The fraud, the scheme, the systematic poisoning. Today was the day. How do you sit calmly drinking coffee when you know the woman across from you has 9 hours of safety left before the world explodes? You breathe. You smile. You comment on the weather on the headline in the morning paper, on the Christmas lights the neighbors still haven't taken down, even though it's mid-December. You perform normalcy like it's the most important negotiation of your life. Because it is. Iris reached across the table and touched my hand. Are you all right? You seem distracted. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The fine lines around her eyes. The slight tremor in her left hand that had started 2 months ago, so subtle she probably hadn't noticed it yet. The way her skin looked paler than it should, thinner, like she was fading. Arsenic does that. It steals you slowly, cell by cell, until one day you just don't wake up. And everyone says how sudden it was, how unexpected, what a tragedy. No, not Iris, not on my watch. I'm fine, I said, squeezing her hand gently. Just thinking about a busy day ahead. She smiled, trusting, and went back to her tea. I checked my watch. 7:58. In my study upstairs, my phone held Conrad's final message from this morning. Everything's in place. FBI coordinating with LAPD. Timing is critical. Let her make the move. Let her make the move. That was the plan. That had always been the plan. Don't strike first. Don't give her any excuse, any defense, any room to claim victimhood. Let Celeste Ashford, or whatever her real name was, walk into this house and do exactly what she had been planning to do for months. Let her show her hand. Let her prove beyond any shadow of doubt exactly what she was. And then end her. The sound cut through the quiet kitchen like a blade. The heavy oak front door opening, then the sharp, deliberate click of designer heels on marble. I set my coffee cup down very carefully, my hand perfectly steady. Celeste had arrived. She walked into the dining room, carrying a leather portfolio, and the stack of papers hit the oak table with a sharp crack that made Iris flinch. I had been expecting this moment for 6 months. Celeste Ashford stood at the head of our breakfast table, 34 years old, and immaculately dressed in the kind of designer suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She had perfected the art of manufactured charm, the warm smile that never quite reached her eyes, the way she touched your arm when she spoke, the laugh that sounded genuine unless you were listening for the calculation underneath. My son had married her 8 months ago, and I had known within 6 weeks that everything about her was a lie. Her real name was Jade Vaughn. She was wanted by the FBI for fraud in Florida and Nevada, and she was trying to kill my wife. Good morning, Iris. Celeste said, her voice honey-sweet as she gestured to the papers. I need you to sign these. Just a formality, really. Estate planning documents. Landon and I want to make sure everything is properly organized now that we're family. Landon hovered in the doorway behind her, 38 years old, and looking every bit the successful executive in his tailored suit. He had inherited a position at my real estate company, had my build and my eyes, but he had never inherited my instincts. The ability to read people, to see the truth beneath the performance, that was something you either had or you didn't. And watching him now, unable to meet my gaze, I knew he was already too deep in whatever web she had spun. Iris set down her teacup, carefully looking at the papers, but not touching them. What kind of estate planning? Transfer documents, Celeste said, still smiling. For the house. Just moving it into a family trust. It protects everyone. I watched Iris's face, saw the moment she understood. My wife had spent 3.5 decades teaching Shakespeare to teenagers. She knew how to recognize a villain's monologue when she heard one. No, Iris said quietly. This is the home Preston and I built together over 40 years. I will not sign it. Celeste's smile didn't waver. Iris, you're not understanding. This is just paperwork. Landon and I are family now. We're trying to help. She then help by leaving, Iris said, and her voice was steel wrapped in silk. And take your papers with you. I saw it happen in slow motion. The mask slipped. The manufactured charm shattered like dropped crystal, and underneath was something cold and vicious and desperate. Celeste's hand came up fast, a closed fist, and she hit Iris across the face hard enough that my wife's head snapped to the side. 42 years of marriage, and this was the first time I had seen anyone raise a hand to my wife. The first time and the last. I was moving before Iris hit the floor, stepping between them, one hand catching Celeste's wrist as she drew back for another blow. I didn't squeeze. Didn't need to. Just held her there, looking into her eyes, letting her see exactly what I was. You just made the last mistake of your life, Celeste. I said, my voice flat and cold. She pressed and let go of me, she hissed. Your wife is being unreasonable. I'm trying to help this family. Get out of my house. I released her wrist and pulled out my phone, walking to the corner of the living room, while Landon rushed to help his wife, while Iris sat in her chair with blood at the corner of her mouth, while everything I had been waiting for finally crystallized into the moment I could act. I typed one word and hit send. Omega, 6 months. I had suspected Celeste 6 months before the wedding even happened. There had been something in the way she looked at our house the first time Landon brought her to dinner, not like someone admiring a home, but like someone calculating an asset. The way she asked too many questions about my business, about Iris's health, about our estate planning. Small things. Patterns. I had called Conrad Hale 72 hours later. Former LAPD detective, 20 years of experience, the best private investigator in Los Angeles. I had handed him a photo of Celeste and said 2 words, find everything. It had taken him 4 weeks to confirm what I already knew. Jade Vaughn, born in Tallahassee, wanted for defrauding 2 men out of their life savings in Nevada and Florida. False identity, false background, false everything. She had been running cons since she was 19, targeting older men, wealthy widowers, anyone with assets worth stealing. And now she had found Landon young enough to manipulate, wealthy enough to target, and positioned perfectly to give her access to me and Iris. Conrad had kept digging. Uncovered the business partner, Vance Ashford, who was helping her set up shell companies. Traced the pattern, marry in, isolate the target, take control of assets, eliminate obstacles. 2 previous victims had died under suspicious circumstances. Howard Finch, age 71, in Florida. Marcus Del Rey, age 66, in Nevada. Both after transferring significant assets to their new wives. Both from sudden illnesses that looked natural until you knew what you were looking for. How long does it take to destroy a life built on lies? 6 months to investigate. 72 hours to build the plan. 1 word to execute it. Plan Omega, the end. I had named it that because I knew exactly how this would finish. Not with me attacking. Not with accusations she could deny or evidence she could explain away, but with her proving beyond any possible defense exactly what she was. The punch wasn't the trigger. It was the final piece of evidence I needed. Physical violence, witnessed, documented by the security cameras I had installed 6 months ago in every room of this house. My phone buzzed. Conrad's reply appeared on the screen. Team is in position. Let her enjoy the next hour. It will be her last free one. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and returned to the dining room. Celeste was still protesting to Landon, her voice rising, the performance cracking at the edges. Iris sat quietly touching her bleeding lip with a napkin, watching me with the steady gaze of a woman who had trusted me for 42 years and knew I would handle this. Celeste had absolutely no idea what had just been set in motion. I left Celeste in the dining room and walked to my private study, locking the door behind me. The diamond ring on Iris's finger had never been just a wedding gift. It was the first piece of a trap I had built 6 months ago. My desktop computer was already running the secure video software when I sat down. 2 clicks later, Conrad Hale's face filled the screen. He was 66, with the kind of composed expression that came from 25 years with the FBI, followed by another 15, as the crisis manager that powerful men called when problems needed to disappear quietly and permanently. I had paid him $70,000 over 6 months, worth every cent. The ring worked perfectly, Conrad said without preamble. GPS signal transmitted to all designated parties the moment you activated the panic button. I've got your coordinates, timeline, and confirmation that the device functioned as designed. And the police? Outside your gate, waiting for your signal. 2 patrol units, plain clothes. I briefed them on the domestic violence situation, but told them to hold position until you're ready. He paused. The ring is FCC compliant, legally your property that you loaned to your wife. Everything by the book. I had given Iris that ring at Landon's wedding in June, presented it as a gift to celebrate our son's marriage. A 3-carat diamond set in platinum, beautiful and expensive, and exactly the kind of gesture everyone expected from a father who had built his fortune in real estate. Iris had worn it every day since, never knowing it contained a GPS tracker and a panic button smaller than a grain of rice. The ring had been a promise not of love, but of protection. A silent alarm system wrapped in diamonds that Celeste had worn on my wife's finger for 6 months, without knowing it was counting down to her destruction. Walk me through what happens next, I said. Conrad's fingers moved across his keyboard. The panic signal went to 4 parties: me, your family attorney Marcus Fletcher, a private detective firm that's been documenting Celeste's movements, and LAPD. All 4 have standing instructions tied to Plan Omega. The moment you sent that text, we initiated Phase 1 surveillance confirmation and evidence preservation. I've got video from your home security system uploading to secure cloud storage right now. The assault on Iris is recorded from 3 angles. Good. Phase 2 begins when you give the word. Police enter the property, take statements, document the assault. Celeste gets arrested for domestic violence. That's the hook that gets her into the system. Once she's in, we unload everything else. Everything else. 6 months of investigation, financial fraud, identity theft, the poisoning, the bodies in Florida and Nevada. Conrad had built a case so comprehensive that Celeste would never see daylight again. But I had to go back to the beginning, to the moment I first knew. It was June 14th, 2024, Landon's wedding day. The ceremony had been beautiful, 200 guests at the venue in Pacific Palisades, oceanfront views, everything perfect. I had stood beside Iris, watching our son marry a woman we barely knew, and I had tried to be happy for him. Then I saw how Celeste looked at our house when we brought everyone back for the reception. I had spent 40 years reading people. In real estate, you learn to see what people wanted versus what they said. A couple touring a house would claim they loved the kitchen, but their eyes would linger on the bedroom that told you they were thinking about starting a family. A businessman would praise the office space, but keep glancing at the garage that told you he collected cars and needed storage. Celeste looked at our Pacific Palisades estate the way an appraiser looks at an asset before liquidation. Not admiring the architecture or the view or the gardens Iris had spent 20 years cultivating. Calculating square footage, property value, Resale potential? How long does it take to recognize a predator? For most people, months or years. For me, who had spent 40 years reading intentions across negotiating tables, it took exactly one glance at the way Celeste measured my home. Then there was Vance, introduced as Celeste's older brother, 37, charming in the way con artists always are. He had cornered me at the reception bar, asking questions that seemed casual but weren't. "Beautiful property, sir. How many bedrooms?" "7. And the lot size?" "Just under 2 acres. Must be worth a fortune in this market." I had smiled, nodded, changed the subject. But I noticed how Vance's eyes catalogued the estate's fixtures and fittings like a thief casing a job. Noticed how he and Celeste exchanged glances when they thought no one was watching. Noticed the way they both tensed when Iris mentioned that the house was in her name, a gift I had given her on our 20th anniversary. 2 weeks after the wedding, Iris started complaining of fatigue, then confusion. She would forget conversations we had just finished, misplace her keys, struggle to remember appointments. At first, I thought it was stress she had never been comfortable with. Celeste had confided that our new daughter-in-law made her uneasy in ways she couldn't quite articulate. But the symptoms got worse, and I remembered the special tea Celeste had given Iris as a wedding gift. The blend Iris now drank every morning. That was when I called Conrad. I'd find out who Celeste Ashford really is, I had told him. Everything. Where she came from, who she's been, what she wants. 3 weeks later, Conrad called me back. His voice had been very quiet. "I need you to sit down for this," he said. On my computer screen now, Conrad's face turned grim as he opened a digital file folder. "Before we proceed with Phase 2, you need to see the complete dossier. Everything I found. Show me." He clicked a key. A photograph appeared, Celeste, but younger, different hair. Below it, a name I didn't recognize. "The woman who married your son," Conrad said slowly. "Her name isn't Celeste. Her real name," Conrad set his voice flat through the computer speaker, "is Jade Vaughn." I stared at the photograph on my screen. Same face, different hair, younger. A booking photo from Jacksonville, Florida, dated 2018. "I'll send you the complete file," Conrad continued. "But you need to know she's moving. Security cameras show her heading to the garage right now." I pulled up the estate security feed on my phone. There she was, walking across the marble foyer towards the side entrance that led to the garage, designer heels, clicking with the confidence of someone who thought she still controlled the situation. In her hand, the keys to the Bugatti Divo, $5.8 million of French engineering that Landon had supposedly bought her as a wedding gift. She had no idea what was about to happen. I watched her enter the garage through 3 different camera angles. She walked past Landon's Tesla, past Iris's Mercedes, straight to the midnight blue hypercar parked in the climate-controlled bay at the far end. She climbed in, settled into the leather seat, pressed the start button. Nothing. She tried again. The dashboard lit up, but the engine stayed silent. She pulled out her phone, probably to call Landon, when the sound of a heavy truck engine rumbled up the driveway. I moved to the second-floor window that overlooked the front gate. A flatbed tow truck from Premium Auto Recovery was pulling up to the security intercom. 2 men in company uniforms climbed out, one of them carrying a clipboard. I pressed the gate release from my phone. "What's happening?" Conrad asked. "Phase 2, I said. "Watch." Ray Hutchins, the tow truck operator, was 50-something and built like a man who had spent 30 years loading vehicles that people didn't want to surrender. He walked up to the garage entrance where Celeste was now standing beside the Bugatti, confusion replacing confidence on her face. "Can I help you?" Her voice carried through the security audio feed. "Ma'am, I have a repossession order for this vehicle." Ray held up the clipboard. Registered to Garfield Property Group LLC, Managing Director Preston Garfield. Order was filed at 8:03 this morning. That's impossible. Celeste's voice went sharp. This is my car. My husband bought it for me. According to the state DMV, ma'am, this vehicle has always been registered to the LLC. I've got the documentation right here if you'd like to review it. I had signed those papers at 8:03 a.m., 3 minutes after Celeste punched my wife. The Bugatti had never been in her name. Landon had bought it with company funds, registered it to the business LLC per my instructions, and gifted Celeste the use of it. She had driven it for 8 months, thinking it was hers. Nothing in this house belonged to her. Nothing ever had. She stood in the driveway in her designer heels, watching Ray and his partner load $5.8 million onto a flatbed truck, the first of many illusions that would be stripped away before this day was done. She's not fighting it, Conrad observed. Smart. Repossession is civil procedure. If she interferes, it becomes criminal. She knows that, I said, because this isn't her first time. The tow truck pulled away with the Bugatti chained to its bed. Celeste Jade stood in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear, probably calling Landon. Probably demanding explanations. Probably still believing she could talk her way out of this. Send me everything, I told Conrad. Already transmitting? You're going to want to sit down for this. I returned to my desk as files began populating on my screen. Police reports, financial records, FBI case files, photographs. 2 faces I didn't recognize stared back at me from driver's license photos. Marcus Del Rey, age 66. Retired orthopedic surgeon from Reno, Nevada. Net worth $3.2 million when he married a woman named Jessica Vaughn in May 2019. By October 2019, his accounts were empty, his home was in foreclosure, and Jessica had disappeared. Marcus died of a heart attack in January 2020, alone and bankrupt. Howard Finch, age 71. Widower, former investment banker from Tampa, Florida. Met a woman named Celeste Morris in March 2022. Married her in June. Dead by December from what the coroner ruled as complications from pneumonia, though the attending physician had noted unusual symptoms, consistent with heavy metal poisoning. The evidence was insufficient for criminal charges. Celeste Morris inherited his estate $4.1 million and vanished before his children could contest the will. 2 men destroyed, 1 possibly murdered, and I had let this predator marry my son. The FBI has been tracking her for 2 years, Conrad said. Federal warrant for wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder. She's been using variations of her real name, Jessica Vaughn, Jade Morris, Celeste Ashford. Always targeting wealthy men, always disappearing before anyone can build a case. Until now. Until now. When she punched your wife this morning, she handed us the hook we needed. Assault gets her arrested, gets her in the system, gets her fingerprinted. The moment those prints hit the database, the FBI gets an automatic alert. How long until they arrive? Then agents are flying from Jacksonville. ETA 4 hours, maybe less. They'll coordinate with LAPD for the takedown. I checked my watch. 9:02 a.m., 4 hours. That's enough time, I said. The enough time for what? To finish this my way. She took 6 months to build her trap. I'm going to dismantle it in 4 hours. Conrad was quiet for a moment. What do you need from me? She keep monitoring, keep recording. And Conrad, I need to know if Landon is part of this. The question I had been avoiding for 6 months. My son, my only child. Was he a victim or an accomplice? I'm still working on that, Conrad admitted. The evidence suggests he's been manipulated, but I can't rule out active participation. He signed documents, moved money, made introductions. Then we'll find out, I said. Before the FBI gets here, we'll know exactly who Jade Vaughn is, what she wanted, and whether my son helped her try to kill my wife. I closed the laptop. Conrad's final words echoed in my mind. 4 hours until the FBI arrives. 4 hours was more than enough time to dismantle the rest of her life piece by piece. Sexusem. There's one more thing you need to know, Conrad said through the phone. About Vance. I pulled the security feed back up, found him by the pool, smoking a cigarette, and scrolling through his phone like he had not a care in the world. The man who had sat at my dinner table for 6 months, calling himself Jade's brother, shared exactly 0 strands of DNA with her. The hair sample I collected from your guest bathroom, Conrad continued. DNA results came back yesterday. 0 biological relation to Jade Vaughn. He's not her brother. I had suspected as much. Blood relatives don't look at each other the way Vance and Jade did when they thought no one was watching the lingering touches, the private smiles, the way they communicated in glances across crowded rooms. What is he then? Advanced man. Possibly her lover. Definitely her accomplice. Conrad's voice took on the clinical tone he used when delivering particularly ugly facts. His real name is Vance Dalton, 37, from Savannah, Georgia. Ashford was the same borrowed surname he used whenever Jade needed him to look like family. Professional gambler with a losing streak. Owes $340,000 to some very violent people. Outstanding warrant in Georgia for wire fraud. Convinced a retired couple to invest their pension in a cryptocurrency scheme that never existed. So Jade recruited him, most likely. Offered him a way out of his debts if he played the devoted brother. His job was to get inside your life, ask the right questions, make observations. Square footage, property values, who controls what accounts. All the information Jade needed to build her approach. I watched Vance through the window. He had been charming at first, self-deprecating humor stories about growing up with Jade that were probably all fabrications, the kind of easy charisma that made you want to like him. He had asked about my business, about Iris's teaching career, about our marriage, all while cataloging our vulnerabilities. 6 months of family dinners. 6 months of watching that parasite smile across the table, asking innocent questions about property values while planning to steal everything I had built. When will you pick him up? I asked. Georgia authorities want him immediately. I've already coordinated with LAPD. They'll serve the warrant within the hour, probably, while he's still at your pool smoking cigarettes and thinking he's got away with something. And when they read him accomplice to murder conspiracy, Conrad's laugh was dark. He'll crack in about 30 seconds. Men like Vance Dalton don't go down for murder charges when they can make a deal. He'll confess everything, how they met, how they planned it, what Jade told him about the previous victims. The FBI will have testimony gift-wrapped before lunch. Good. I checked my watch. 9:45. I need to check on Iris. I'll call you when Vance is in custody. I found Iris in our bedroom sitting in the reading chair by the window. Dr. Ellen Reyes, our family physician for 15 years, sat across from her, taking her pulse with the quiet efficiency of someone who understood when discretion mattered more than protocol. I had called Ellen at 8:15 this morning, asked her to come through the back entrance, told her nothing except that Iris needed immediate medical attention and complete confidentiality. Her vitals are stable, Ellen said as I entered. Blood pressure slightly elevated, but that's to be expected given the circumstances. Iris looked at me and I saw the question in her eyes. The same question I had been asking myself for 3 months. How bad is it? I pulled a chair close and took her hand. The lab results came back 3 days ago. I didn't want to tell you until I had a plan in place. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Your morning tea. The blend Celeste gave you. It contained arsenic trioxide. Iris's face went very still. Ellen made a small sound of professional horror. Low doses. I continued. Enough to cause confusion, memory lapses, fatigue. Enough to make you appear senile or incompetent when you needed to sign documents. Not enough to kill you quickly, just enough to make you vulnerable. How long? Iris asked quietly. We think since August. 4 months of steady dosing. Ellen leaned forward, her medical training taking over. Iris, I need to know, are you still drinking that tea? No. Iris's voice was steady. I stopped 3 weeks ago. I stared at her. What? Something felt wrong. I can't explain it better than that. The taste changed, or maybe I just started paying attention to how I felt afterward. Foggy, disconnected. She met my eyes. I know my own mind. I've spent 35 years teaching literature, analyzing texts, understanding subtext. When my thoughts started feeling like someone else was editing them, I knew something was wrong. So I stopped drinking the tea. How does a retired literature teacher who spent decades teaching teenagers to trust their instincts about Shakespeare recognize poison in her own teacup when her husband, who spent 40 years reading liars across negotiating tables, almost missed it entirely? You saved yourself, I said, my voice rough. Ellen was already making notes. That instinct saved your life, Iris. 3 weeks without exposure, the arsenic levels in your system have dropped significantly. We'll need to run more tests, but I don't anticipate permanent damage. Just detox protocols and time. The relief hit me like a physical force. I had spent 3 months terrified I would lose her, that I had waited too long, that my careful planning would cost me the only thing that mattered. But Iris had saved herself before I even knew the full extent of the danger. There's something else you should know, I said. Celeste's real name is Jade Vaughn. She's wanted by the FBI for fraud and suspected murder. The FBI will be here by early afternoon to arrest her. Iris absorbed this without flinching. And Landon, I don't know yet if he's a victim or an accomplice, but I'm going to find out. I left Iris in Ellen's care and stepped into the hallway. From somewhere downstairs came the sound of Jade's voice, light laughing, talking on the phone, as if she hadn't just lost her expensive car, and her freedom wasn't measured in hours. My jaw tightened as I walked toward the sound. I found her in the kitchen, leaning against the granite counter with her phone in hand, still projecting the confidence of someone who thought she controlled the situation. The bank notification appeared on her screen at exactly 10:32 a.m., and I watched her face change from confidence to confusion in the span of a single breath. This says my account is frozen, Jade said, staring at the screen. There must be some mistake. I poured myself another cup of coffee, taking my time, not looking at her. Technical issue with this bank, probably. These things happen. She refreshed the app. The message didn't change. Account temporarily restricted pending legal review. Contact your branch manager for details. This is the joint account with Landon, she said, her voice rising slightly. Our primary account. How can it just be frozen? Banks are very sensitive these days. Fraud alerts, compliance reviews. I took a sip of coffee. I'm sure it will sort itself out. What I didn't tell her was that I had triggered an emergency temporary restraining order at 8:15 that morning. Marcus Fletcher, my family attorney, had filed the paperwork with a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge, backed by photographic evidence of Iris's bruised face, security footage of the assault, and preliminary financial analysis showing indicators of fraud. California family law moves fast when there's documented domestic violence and suspected financial crimes. The judge had signed the order at 9:45 a.m. Because Landon was the guarantor on that joint account, and because I was the co-signer on the linked LLC credit line that funded it, the TRO created a legal domino effect. One account froze, then another, then the credit cards, then the business line of credit. The entire financial chain locked down in sequence, each institution protecting itself from potential fraud liability. Jade tried to open her banking app again, then her credit card app. I watched the realization dawn on her face as each one showed the same message: account restricted. Contact customer service. The financial empire she thought she was stealing disappeared like smoke the moment she tried to grasp it. Every account, every credit line, every dollar frozen by the stroke of a judge's pen that morning. "I need to call Landon," she said, already dialing. "He's at the office," I said. "He mentioned a client meeting, probably has his phone off." She left 3 voicemails in rapid succession, her voice getting tighter with each one. Then she tried calling her bank. I listened to her navigate the automated system, get transferred twice, finally reach someone who told her they couldn't discuss account restrictions over the phone, and she would need to visit a branch in person with valid identification. I need to go," she said, grabbing her purse. "Your car was repossessed," I reminded her mildly. "Would you like me to call you an Uber?" The look she gave me was pure venom. "I'll call my own ride." She swept out of the kitchen heels, clicking on marble phone pressed to her ear. I gave her 30 seconds, then returned to my study and locked the door. Conrad called at 11:00 a.m. sharp. "Vance is in custody," he said, without preamble. "Georgia police picked him up at a Pasadena hotel 45 minutes ago. Outstanding warrant, no incident." They read him his rights. And here's where it gets interesting: the moment they mentioned accomplice conspiracy to murder charges based on the Florida investigation, he asked to make a deal. Already, so didn't even wait for a lawyer. Murder conspiracy carries a minimum of 15 years in California. The detective told him that. Also told him that cooperating witnesses who provide substantial assistance typically see significant sentencing reductions. Vance requested a plea agreement on the spot. I closed my eyes, picturing it. A man who owed hundreds of thousands to violent creditors now facing murder charges, suddenly seeing his one way out. "What did he give them?" "Everything." Conrad's voice carried grim satisfaction. "The recording is being transferred to FBI Jacksonville as we speak, but I got the highlights." Vance confirmed he's not Jade's brother. They met 2 years ago at a casino in Atlanta. She recruited him to play the devoted sibling, promised him a cut of whatever they stole. He confirmed the arsenic poisoning plan for Iris. He confirmed there's a $5 million life insurance policy on Landon that Jade took out 6 months ago. He confirmed his role was to scout the property, befriend you and Iris, gather intelligence on your financial holdings and vulnerabilities. 45 minutes. That was all it took for a man drowning in gambling debt to trade his lover's freedom for 5 fewer years in federal prison. "The life insurance policy," I said slowly. "Jade was planning to kill Landon." According to Vance, that was phase 2. First, get Iris to sign over the house while she was mentally compromised from the arsenic. Second, isolate Landon from his support system. Third, arrange an accident. Vance didn't have specifics, but he said Jade had mentioned a car crash or a hiking fall. Make it look natural, collect the insurance, disappear. My son, my only child. Jade had married him with the explicit intention of killing him for insurance money once she had squeezed every other asset from our family. The confession is recorded and witnessed. Video and audio with 2 detectives present. It's ironclad. Between Vance's testimony and the physical evidence we've collected, the arsenic tea, the security footage of the assault, the financial records, Jade Vaughn is never seeing freedom again. I sat in silence, processing. Everything was falling into place exactly as I had planned. The accounts frozen, the car gone, the accomplice arrested and confessing, the FBI en route. Jade's world was collapsing around her in real time, and she still didn't understand the full scope of what was coming. "Send the recording to Landon's phone," I said. Conrad paused. "Are you sure it's graphic?" Vance doesn't spare details. "He needs to hear it." I said quietly. Not from me, not summarized or filtered. He needs to hear, in Vance's own words, exactly what his wife planned to do to him. I'll send it now. I looked toward the door. Somewhere beyond it, my son still believed his wife loved him. I sat alone in my study after Conrad hung up, staring at the photographs that lined the wall above my desk. The story of 40 years told in silent frames, but they didn't show the cost of building an empire or the price of raising a son who had never learned to recognize predators. The first photograph was from 1984. I was 19 years old, standing in front of a small duplex in East Los Angeles, wearing work boots and a white undershirt, grinning like an idiot, because I had just purchased my first property with money saved from 3 years of construction work. $15,000 for a building that needed everything new: roof, new plumbing, new electrical, new everything. I had fixed it myself, nights and weekends, learning as I went. Iris was in that photograph too, though you had to look carefully to see her in the background, 22 years old, fresh out of her teaching credential program, holding a paintbrush and wearing my old work shirt that hung to her knees. We got married 6 months later. The second photograph showed our first real home together. Not the duplex I was renovating, but the apartment on Figueroa Street where we lived, while I worked on properties during the day and took business classes at night. 400 square feet, third-floor walk-up, broken heater that the landlord never fixed. Iris taught 9th grade English at a school 3 miles away and walked to work every morning to save gas money. I remembered the night I came home and found her crying at the kitchen table. She had been offered a position as assistant principal at a school in Pasadena, better pay, career advancement, everything she had worked toward. But it would mean longer hours, less flexibility, and I was in the middle of buying my third property, which meant irregular income and constant risk. I could take it, I had told her. This is your dream. But she had looked at me with those steady eyes and said, no. My dream is building something with you. The principal position will still be there in 5 years. This moment won't be. She never became a principal. She taught literature to teenagers for 35 years, came home every afternoon at 4 o'clock, and believed in me when no one else did. The first apartment on Figueroa Street had a broken heater and a roof that leaked. But Iris had looked at those 4 walls and said through tears, "This is the most beautiful home I've ever seen because it's ours." I had spent 40 years making sure she never regretted that choice. The photographs continued across the wall. Our second house in Burbank, the third in Studio City, the fourth in Sherman Oaks. 6 moves in our first 8 years of marriage, each one a step up, each one purchased with money from the properties I renovated and sold. Iris packed and unpacked every time without complaint, turned each new house into a home, taught her classes during the day, and kept our books at night. By 1995, Garfield Property Group owned 17 properties. By 2042. By 2010, the company managed a portfolio worth over $200 million. And somewhere in that climb, I had made a critical error. I looked at the photographs of Landon. Birthday parties in backyards that kept getting bigger. Private schools. Summer camps in Europe. A college graduation from Stanford where he walked across the stage in designer clothes. No student loans, no financial stress. No understanding of what it took to build security from nothing. I had given my son everything I never had. Stability, comfort. The certainty that he would never sleep in an apartment with a broken heater, never have to choose between gas money and groceries, never have to wonder if next month's rent would make or break him. And in doing so, I had failed to teach him the most important lesson of all, that predators exist, that people smile while they sharpen knives, that trust without verification is just another word for victim. How do you teach your child to recognize wolves when you've spent their entire life making sure they never had to see one? Landon had grown up in safety, surrounded by people I had vetted in neighborhoods where money bought insulation from danger. He went to schools where everyone came from families like ours, wealthy, established, protected. He entered the family business where I had built systems and hired staff specifically to shield him from the ugly side of real estate, the predatory lenders and dishonest contractors and clients who would smile while they sued you. I had made my son too comfortable, too trusting, too certain that the world was fundamentally safe and people were fundamentally good. And then Jade Vaughn had walked into his life, seen exactly what he was, a wealthy man who had never learned to question a beautiful woman's motives, and targeted him with the precision of a sniper. This was my failure too. Not just Landon's naivety, but my role in creating it. I had built walls around him so high that he never learned to build his own defenses. I had protected him so completely that he had no idea what danger looked like even when it was sleeping in his bed. The irony was brutal. I had spent 40 years teaching Landon about property values, market analysis, negotiation tactics, legal structures, everything, except how to read the intentions of the person sitting across from him. The one skill I had used to build our fortune, the instinct I had honed across thousands of deals, and I had never passed it down to my own son. But this ended today. I would dismantle Jade Vaughn's life piece by piece, yes. But I would also give Landon something more valuable than protection. I would give him the truth, unfiltered and brutal, so he could learn what I should have taught him years ago. That some people are hunters, that wealth makes you prey, that love and manipulation can wear the same face until you learn to see beneath the surface. My phone buzzed. Conrad. The FBI agents just landed at LAX, he said. ETA to your address, 90 minutes. I checked my watch. 11:02 a.m. 90 minutes until everything became official. 90 minutes until the federal machinery took over and this stopped being my operation and became theirs. 90 minutes. That was enough time for one more conversation. One final chance to reach the sun. I had failed to prepare for this moment. I found Landon in the small gym at the end of the east hallway, sitting on the weight bench with his hands gripping his knees so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He looked up when I entered, and I saw in his face what I had missed for 6 months. The exhaustion, the fear, the shame of a man who had been carrying a secret too heavy to bear alone. He had been waiting for this conversation, maybe for months. I pulled over a chair and sat across from him, close enough that we were eye level. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, just asked the question I should have asked 6 months ago. Tell me what she has on you, Landon. His face crumbled. Not the composed executive who ran divisions of my company. Not the confident man who had stood at an altar 8 months ago promising to love and cherish. Just my son, 38 years old, breaking down like a child who had finally been given permission to tell the truth. Photos, he said, his voice cracking. Videos, from when we first started dating. She staged situations, made it look like I was doing things I wasn't, and then she recorded them. What kind of things? Compromising, illegal, things that would destroy my career if they went public. He wiped his face with shaking hands. She showed them to me 2 months after the wedding. Said if I didn't do exactly what she wanted, she'd leak them online. Send them to your clients, to the media, to everyone. And what did she want you to do? Sign documents, transfer accounts, give her access to company finances? I didn't read half of what I signed, Dad. I was terrified. I thought if I cooperated, if I just gave her what she wanted, eventually she'd have enough and it would stop. A 38-year-old man reduced to signing away his family's legacy because he was terrified of photographs. I wanted to rage at the weakness. But I had been the one who raised a son who valued reputation over truth, who feared embarrassment more than he feared predators. "When did you know?" Landon asked quietly. "About her. 6 months before your wedding. I suspected. Couldn't prove it yet. But I knew. Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at my son, really looked at him, saw the boy who had grown up in safety, who had never learned to question a beautiful woman's motives because I had made sure he never had to. "Because you wouldn't have believed me," I said. "You were in love, and I had never taught you how to see what I saw. That failure is on me, Landon. Not you." "What do I do now?" I pulled out my phone, typed a number, and handed it to him. "That's Marcus Fletcher, our family attorney. You're going to call him right now and tell him everything you just told me. Every document you signed, every account you accessed, every instruction Jade gave you. You're going to confess it all before the FBI gets here." "The FBI, they land in less than 90 minutes. Jade Vaughn is a federal fugitive wanted for fraud and murder. When they arrest her, they're going to pull every financial record, every document, every transaction. If your name is on something illegal and you haven't already cooperated, you become an accomplice. If you confess first, you become a victim." Landon stared at the phone number. "She recorded you to control you," I said quietly. "We recorded her to destroy her. The difference is ours will be played in federal court." I stood, placed a hand on my son's shoulder. "Call Marcus. Tell him everything. And Landon, this ends today. All of it." I left him sitting there with the phone in his hand and walked back to the hallway, giving him privacy to make the call that would determine whether he went down with Jade or stood against her. I was halfway back to my study when I heard Landon's phone buzz. Once, twice, a text notification. Then I heard the sound I would never forget, my son's sharp intake of breath, like he had been punched in the stomach. I turned back. Landon was standing in the gym doorway staring at his phone, his face completely drained of color. "What is it?" He didn't answer, just handed me the phone with a shaking hand. The video had been sent from Conrad's encrypted line, the one he used when evidence couldn't wait for explanation. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of hotel security footage from 2 weeks ago. I recognized the timestamp, December 1st. The weekend Landon had told us he and Jade were visiting friends in Santa Barbara. The footage showed a hotel room. Jade and Vance in bed together, talking in the casual intimacy of lovers who had been together far longer than 8 months. I pressed play. Jade's voice came through clearly. "Once the old woman signs the house over, we get Landon to update his life insurance. Then we wait 3 months for the suicide clause to expire. One clean accident. 5 million plus the house, plus whatever's left in the business accounts. One clean accident." 3 words spoken casually while planning to murder the man sleeping down the hall. Vance's voice. "What about the old man?" Jade laughed. "Preston, he's 68. Heart disease runs in his family. He'll be dead or in a nursing home within a year anyway. And if he's not well, arsenic works on men too. And if Landon doesn't update the insurance, sure, then we make him. Same way we've made him do everything else. Show him the videos. Threaten to destroy him. He's too weak to resist. His father raised him that way. Soft, protected, the perfect mark." The video continued. They discussed timing methods, contingencies. Talked about putting Iris in a state facility once they had power of attorney. Laughed about how easy it had been to manipulate Landon, how obvious his tells were when he was lying. How completely he had fallen for every manufactured emotion. I watched my son's face as he listened to his wife describe him as weak, pathetic, the perfect victim. Watched him hear her plan his murder in the same tone she might use to discuss dinner reservations. When the video ended, Landon stood very still for a long moment. Then something changed in his posture. His spine straightened, his jaw set. The trembling in his hands stopped. He walked past me without a word, his face still pale, but no longer broken. I heard him pick up the phone in the hallway, heard him dial, and then I heard my son say, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was 12 years old, clear and steady and certain. "Huh, Dad? I need you to tell me what to do. Call Marcus Fletcher." I told my son. "Tell him everything. Then wait for me." I hung up and went to my study to collect the file Conrad had sent. By the time I returned to the living room at 12:30, Jade had reappeared, wearing a fresh outfit and a restored expression of confidence, as if the last 4 hours hadn't happened, as if her car wasn't gone, and her accounts weren't frozen, and her accomplice wasn't sitting in police custody, confessing to murder conspiracy. The lawsuit envelope landed on the coffee table with practiced precision, and she sat across from me wearing the kind of smile that said she believed she still held winning cards. I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady and businesslike. "This situation has gotten out of hand. The car repossession, the frozen accounts, I'm sure there are explanations, but it's created unnecessary tension. So I've prepared a proposal." She gestured to the envelope. "I have the best family law attorney in Los Angeles on retainer, Preston. This is a draft civil suit for unlawful asset seizure, emotional distress, and defamation. If I file this, it will tie up your estate in litigation for years. Legal fees alone could run into the millions. Your reputation in the real estate community would be severely damaged." I picked up the envelope but didn't open it. "However," she continued, "I'm willing to be reasonable. Sign the Pacific Palisades house over to me and Landon as community property. I'll drop everything, the lawsuit, any claims against you or Iris. Landon stays happily married. The family stays intact. Everyone moves forward." She leaned back, crossing her legs, projecting the calm authority of someone in control. "It's a fair deal, Preston. The house for peace. Think about Iris. Think about Landon. Do you really want to put them through a public legal battle?" She sat there negotiating with a man who had already dismantled her entire life, offering to trade a house she would never own for crimes she would absolutely pay for, and she genuinely believed it was a fair deal. I smiled. It was the first time I had smiled all day. That's a very interesting offer," I said. "Tell me, Celeste, or should I call you Jade, do you know what happened in Jacksonville, Florida in 2022 to a man named Howard Finch?" The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice had lost its steady confidence. "No." I reached down beside my chair and pulled out the file Conrad had compiled. Placed it on the coffee table next to her worthless lawsuit. "Let me refresh your memory." I opened the folder. The first page was a booking photo from Jacksonville 2018. Same face, different hair. Below it, a name, Jade Vaughn, Howard Finch. I continued calmly. 71 years old. Widower. Former investment banker. You married him in June 2022 under the name Celeste Morris. He died 6 months later from what the medical examiner called complications from pneumonia, though the attending physician noted symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. You inherited his estate, $4.1 million. Then you disappeared before his children could contest the will. Jade stood up, her hands clenched. "This is fabricated. My lawyers will—" "Marcus Del Rey," I said, turning to the next page. 66 years old. Retired orthopedic surgeon from Reno, Nevada. You married him in May 2019 under the name Jessica Vaughn. By October, his accounts were empty and his home was in foreclosure. He died of a heart attack 4 months later. $3.2 million gone. You disappeared the day after his funeral. I looked up at her. And now my wife. Arsenic trioxide in her morning tea. Low doses over 4 months, designed to make her appear senile enough to sign documents transferring this house to you. That's insane, Jade said, but her voice was shaking now. You can't prove any of this. These are just photos and accusations. I'll sue you for defamation for... Vance Dalton was arrested at 10:45 this morning, I said gently. Georgia police picked him up on an outstanding warrant. When federal investigators informed him that he was facing accomplice conspiracy to murder charges, he requested a plea deal immediately. He's been speaking to them for the past 2 hours. I watched her face as the words sank in. Watched the moment she understood that her partner, her lover, the man she had brought into my home and passed off as her brother, had given her up to save himself. Vance confirmed everything, I continued. The arsenic plan. The $5 million life insurance policy you took out on my son. Your plan to kill Landon in what you called one clean accident after the suicide clause expired. Your intention to put Iris in a state nursing facility once you had power of attorney. All of it on tape, witnessed, legally admissible. 2 men destroyed, 1 likely murdered. And she had walked into my home 6 months ago, believing a 68-year-old retired real estate executive would be easier to fool than the men who came before. The FBI has an active federal warrant for your arrest, I said. Wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder. They landed at LAX approximately 30 minutes ago. They'll be here within the hour. Jade's hands were trembling now. The manufactured composure, the practiced charm, the confident smile, all of it stripped away. What remained was something raw and desperate and finally honest. You can't, she whispered. Landon will be destroyed. You'll destroy your own son to get to me. Landon is upstairs right now confessing everything to our family attorney. Every document you made him sign, every threat you used. To control him, every lie you told. He's filing as a cooperating witness with the DA's office before the FBI even arrives. I closed the folder and placed it back on the table. You chose the wrong family, Jade. She sat back down on the leather sofa very slowly, her hands gripping the armrests. The lawsuit papers lay on the coffee table between us, worthless now, pathetic now. For the first time since I had met her, since I had watched her charm my son and poison my wife and calculate the value of my home, Jade Vaughn had absolutely nothing to say. I left Jade sitting in the living room and walked upstairs to my study. Through the closed door, I could hear Landon's voice shaking but determined. His words were completely his own for the first time in 6 months. I opened the door quietly. Landon sat at my desk facing the laptop screen where Marcus Fletcher appeared via video call. Marcus had been our family attorney for 12 years, a man who had guided wealthy families through divorces, estate disputes, and the occasional crisis that required both discretion and decisive legal action. He looked at Landon with the kind of focused attention that made clients feel heard even when the news was bad. Walk me through the timeline again, Marcus was saying. When did the blackmail begin? 2 months after the wedding. Landon said, his voice steadier now that he had started. She showed me photos and videos. Some were staged to look compromising. Others were... She had doctored them, somehow made it look like I was doing things I never did. She said if I didn't cooperate, she'd send them to Dad's clients, to the media, everywhere. What did she want you to do? Sign documents mostly. Bank authorizations, property transfers, business agreements. I didn't read half of them. She would put them in front of me and say, sign here, and I would just sign. He paused. Some of them I found out later she forged my signature entirely. I never even saw those. Marcus made notes on his screen. The DA's office needs to hear this directly from you, Landon. As a cooperating witness filing a voluntary complaint, you're protected from accomplice charges. But the statement has to come from you unprompted, of your own free will. Landon nodded. I understand. I stood outside the door, listening to my son confess 6 months of humiliation and fear, and I realized the hardest part of being a father wasn't protecting your child. It was stepping back and letting them save themselves. Marcus made a call. A few minutes later, another face appeared on the split screen, a woman from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, crisp suit, no-nonsense expression. "Oh, Mr. Garfield," she said. "I'm Assistant DA Catherine Morrison. I understand you want to file a voluntary complaint. Before we proceed, I need to confirm this statement is being made without coercion, threat, or promise of benefit. Do you understand?" "I understand," Landon said. "Can please state your full name and proceed?" Landon took a breath. When he spoke, his voice didn't shake. "My name is Landon Garfield. I want to report my wife Celeste Ashford for fraud, blackmail, conspiracy, and attempted murder." I closed the door quietly and left my son to finish what he had started. That call, that choice, had to be entirely his own. At 1:30, I found Iris in our bedroom with Dr. Reyes. Ellen had just finished taking blood pressure readings and was documenting her findings on a tablet. "How is she?" I asked. "Remarkably well considering," Ellen said. "The lab results confirm low-dose arsenic trioxide exposure over approximately 3 months. But because Iris stopped drinking the tea 3 weeks ago on her own instinct, the levels in her system have dropped significantly. No permanent organ damage, no cognitive impairment. 2 to 3 weeks of detox protocols and she should be completely clear." Iris sat in the reading chair by the window looking more alert than she had in months. "I told you," she said. "I knew something was wrong with that tea." "You saved yourself," I said quietly. Ellen prepared a medical affidavit on her tablet. "This documents the poisoning, the timeline, the symptoms, and my findings. The FBI will want this as evidence." "The FBI," Iris said. "They're coming here. Within the hour. They'll arrest Jade for federal crimes. You don't need to be here for that. I can take you to stay with—" "No." Iris's voice was firm. "I want to see her face when they put the handcuffs on." "Iris, I've been a school teacher for 35 years, Preston. When I caught students cheating, I always made them look me in the eye. Always. I didn't send them to the principal's office without confronting them first. This is no different. 35 years of teaching teenagers had given Iris an instinct more reliable than any lab test she knew when someone was trying to poison her mind, and her body had followed that wisdom 3 weeks before. The evidence proved her right. "She tried to kill you," I said. "I know, and I'm going to watch her answer for it." Dr. Reyes looked between us, then quietly excused herself. "I'll be downstairs if you need me. The affidavit will be ready in 10 minutes. When Ellen left, Iris reached for my hand. "How's Landon?" "Talking to the DA. Filing a formal complaint. He's cooperating." "Good." She squeezed my hand. "He's stronger than we thought. He just needed someone to believe him. I should have seen it sooner. Should have warned him before the wedding. He wouldn't have listened. You know that." She looked at me with those steady eyes that had seen through 35 years of teenage lies and adult deceptions. "Some lessons you can't teach. People have to learn them." My phone buzzed. "Conrad." "Jade just tried to book a flight to Mexico City," he said without preamble. "Used her Celeste Ashford passport. The flag I put in the system at 11 this morning caught it immediately. Reservation was denied, and airport security was automatically notified. She's trapped." I looked out the bedroom window toward the estate grounds. Somewhere down there, Jade was realizing that every escape route had been closed. Every door locked, every avenue blocked. "How much longer until the FBI arrives?" I asked. 45 minutes, maybe less. They're coordinating with LAPD for the takedown. Do you want local police to move in now? Yeah, no, I said. Let her try a few more doors first. Let her understand exactly how thoroughly this was planned. I hung up and looked at Iris. She just tried to flee to Mexico. The passport flag caught her. Iris's expression didn't change. Good, she said quietly. Then she'll still be here when the FBI arrives. 20 minutes later, I found her in the guest bedroom, a suitcase half-packed on the bed. Jade froze when I opened the door, one hand still holding a stack of folded clothes, her face a mask of defiance that cracked the moment our eyes met. Going somewhere? I asked. She set the clothes down carefully, composure returning. I think it's best if I stay at a hotel for a few days. Let things cool down. Give everyone space to think clearly. That's not going to work. Preston, this has gotten out of hand. I understand you're upset about this morning, but your passport is flagged, I said. Every airport, every border crossing, every car rental agency. You tried to book a flight to Mexico City an hour ago. The system denied it automatically and notified law enforcement. The color drained from her face. Your car was repossessed this morning. Your bank accounts are frozen under an emergency restraining order I filed at 8:15. Your credit cards are maxed or locked. Vance Dalton has been in police custody for 3 hours, and he's given federal investigators a full confession, including details about the $5 million life insurance policy you took out on my son. I stepped into the room, not threatening, just present. The Pacific Palisades house you wanted Iris to sign over. It's in an irrevocable trust with Iris as the sole beneficiary. Even if she had signed your papers, they would have been legally void. The Bugatti you drove for 8 months registered to my LLC from day one. The joint account with Landon, I'm a co-signer with veto authority, which is how the restraining order froze it instantly. Jade sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Every asset you thought you were stealing was never actually available to steal. Every document you had Landon sign was either invalid from the start or has been voided by his attorney this afternoon. Every move you made I saw coming because I've been watching you make the same moves for 6 months. I pulled the chair from the desk and sat across from her. Conrad has been tracking your location, your financial activity, and your movement patterns since June metadata, and records nothing that required a wiretap order under California law. The GPS tracker in Iris's ring transmitted your exact position every time you were in this house. The security cameras I installed recorded every conversation, every gesture, every moment you thought no one was watching. You might wonder why I didn't just walk away when I found out who she really was. Why I let Landon marry her. Why I let her into our home. Why I waited 6 months watching my wife get slowly poisoned instead of calling the police the day I confirmed her identity. Because evidence takes time. Because federal cases require documentation. Because I wanted to make absolutely certain that when she fell, she would never get back up. There's nowhere to run, Jade. Every door is locked. Every account is frozen. Every person you brought into this conspiracy has either been arrested or is being arrested right now. The FBI will be here within the hour. She looked at me with something that might have been respect, if respect could exist between a predator and the trap that caught her. Before I reveal what she asked me, are you still with me right now? Comment A if revealing the truth was justified, or B if I should have stayed silent. Add one brief reason why. This is where everything turns. Please note what follows contains recreated details for narrative purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. How long have you known? Jade asked quietly. The question I had been waiting for. The one honest thing she might ever ask me. 6 months before the wedding, I said. I suspected you the first time Landon brought you to dinner. The way you looked at this house, the questions Vance asked about square footage and property value, the timeline of your relationship with my son, it all felt choreographed. So you investigated me. I called Conrad 2 days later. It took him 4 weeks to confirm what I already knew. Jade Vaughn, wanted in Florida and Nevada, 2 previous victims, Marcus Del Rey, Howard Finch, both destroyed, one possibly murdered. She was very still. I could have told Landon. I continued. Could have stopped the wedding. Could have had you arrested before you ever became part of this family. Why didn't you? Because the FBI had tried to catch you twice before, and you disappeared both times. Because I knew if I just chased you away, you would find another victim, another family, another wealthy man, too trusting or too lonely to see what you were. I wanted to make sure you never did this again. I leaned forward, so I let you marry my son. I let you move into our lives. I let you think you were winning. And I built the trap one piece at a time, the GPS ring, the security cameras, the financial forensics, the witness statements, the medical evidence, everything the FBI needed to put you away for the rest of your life, documented and recorded, and legally admissible. Revenge isn't a moment, it's architecture. The entire marriage, Jade said slowly. You knew from the beginning. I knew. Then you used your own son as bait. I protected my son by making sure you would be caught before you could kill him. The life insurance policy you took out, I knew about it the day you filed the paperwork. The moment that policy's suicide clause expired, I would have had you arrested. You never would have gotten the chance to stage your clean accident. For 30 seconds, we sat in silence. 2 people who had destroyed each other in different ways, staring across the wreckage. Did any of it mean anything to you? She asked, her voice barely audible. The family dinners, the holidays, the conversations. Was it all just surveillance? Every second of it. Her voice was barely a whisper. Then you never loved me at all. I met her eyes. No, I said. But you loved me, and that was enough. The doorbell rang 3 sharp chimes. The FBI had arrived early. I opened the front door. 2 FBI agents stood on the porch, badges already out, expressions professionally neutral. They were polite, clinical. They wanted 20 minutes to map exit points and coordinate with local law enforcement before the formal arrest. Of course, I said. Whatever you need. Jade had retreated upstairs when she heard the doorbell. I could hear her footsteps above us, pacing in the guest bedroom. The agents walked through the house with practiced efficiency, noting windows, doors, the layout of rooms. One of them spoke quietly into a radio, confirming positions, establishing protocol. I waited in my study while they worked. At exactly 3 p.m., my phone rang. Conrad. Status update, he said. Vance Dalton signed the plea agreement an hour ago. 5 years federal prison, full cooperation. He's already on record confirming everything: the arsenic plan, the life insurance policy, Jade's real identity, the previous victims. The testimony is airtight. Good. FBI confirmed Jade Vaughn's identity via fingerprint match to the federal warrant. Celeste Ashford never legally existed. Every document she signed under that name is fraudulent. The DA received Landon's complaint at 1:15 this afternoon. He's officially a cooperating witness, which protects him from accomplice charges. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me. Landon was protected. The arsenic affidavit from Dr. Reyes is being processed as we speak, Conrad continued. The emergency TRO has been converted to a preliminary injunction. All of Jade's accounts remain frozen pending the criminal investigation. Marcus Fletcher filed notice with every financial institution she's ever touched, and the agents not coordinating with LAPD. They're ready to move whenever you give the word. Not yet, I said. Preston, trust me, Give her 30 more minutes. Conrad was quiet for a moment. What are you waiting for? For her to prove one last time that I was right about who she is. I hung up and walked to the second-floor window that overlooked the driveway and front gate. The FBI agents were in an unmarked car parked on the street, waiting. Local police were positioned at both ends of the block, invisible but present. You orchestrate the endgame the way you orchestrate everything else, by making them think it was their idea. An hour earlier, I had left my phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. With a rideshare app open, the destination already entered LAX Terminal B. Not obvious enough to be suspicious, but visible enough for someone desperately looking for options. I had walked away, given Jade privacy, let her think she had found her own solution. At 3:30 p.m., I watched her emerge from the side door carrying a single carry-on bag. She had changed into traveling clothes, jeans, comfortable shoes, a jacket. She walked quickly, but not frantically, projecting the confidence of someone who thought she had found the one exit no one was watching. She passed through the gate and stood on the sidewalk, phone in hand. 2 minutes later, a gray Honda pulled up. Uber. She climbed in, closed the door, and the car pulled away, heading south toward the 405 freeway. I didn't move, didn't call out, didn't alert the agents waiting on the street. My phone buzzed. Conrad, FBI has visual. Intercepting southbound 405 at Wilshire exit. ETA 4 minutes. I watched the Honda disappear around the corner. Somewhere in that car, Jade Vaughn was probably breathing easier, thinking she had slipped through the trap, that the old man had been too slow or too trusting to see her leave. That LAX would be crowded enough to disappear into, that she could buy a ticket with cash, that Mexico or Canada or somewhere far away would be possible if she just kept moving. She had no idea that 3 unmarked FBI vehicles were following her at a careful distance, that every move she made was being coordinated through encrypted radio channels, that the rideshare driver had been briefed 30 minutes ago, that his passenger was a federal fugitive, and to drive exactly as directed. 4 minutes felt like an hour. Then my phone lit up again. Conrad. Contact made. Pulling her vehicle over now. I imagined it, the Honda, merging onto the 405, thinking it was just another Los Angeles afternoon, just another fare to the airport. Then the unmarked cars boxing it in lights, flashing, the driver pulling over, because federal agents were very clear about instructions. Jade in the back seat, realizing too late that she had never been escaping. She had been driven exactly where they wanted her. The arrest would happen there on the side of the freeway, away from this house. Away from Iris, who had insisted she wanted to see justice served, but didn't need to see her daughter-in-law taken away in handcuffs in the driveway, where family photos had been taken for 8 months. I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired. 40 years of building a business. 6 months of building a case. Thousands of hours of surveillance and documentation and careful planning, all to catch one woman who had made the mistake of targeting my family instead of someone weaker. My phone buzzed at 4:12 p.m. Conrad's message was brief. She's in custody. FBI transporting to downtown LA Federal Building for booking. Arraignment tomorrow morning. It's done. I typed back 2 words, thank you. Then I added, send the final bill to Marcus. Whatever it is, pay it. Conrad's reply came immediately, already sent. And Preston, it was an honor. I sat in the study for a long moment looking at that message. It was an honor. 6 months of work, thousands of billable hours, probably close to 6 figures in investigative fees. Worth every cent, and the house was quiet. The FBI agents had left once they received confirmation of the arrest. The local police had cleared from the street. It was just our family now, me, Iris, and Landon, somewhere in this too large house, processing what had just happened. I stood and walked toward the stairs. Iris would be in our bedroom, probably with Dr. Reyes, probably waiting for news. She didn't know yet that Jade was gone, that the woman who had tried to poison her and steal our home and murder our son was now in federal custody. The study was silent, except for the hum of my phone on the desk. Conrad's last message glowed on the screen. "She's in custody." I had typed back, "Thank you." Now I had to walk upstairs and tell my wife that her daughter-in-law wouldn't be coming home. I found Iris sitting by the window in our bedroom. Her hands folded in her lap, watching the afternoon light turn gold over the Pacific. She didn't turn when I entered, just kept her gaze on the horizon. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. I sat down in the chair beside her. "She's in custody. They arrested her on the 405 freeway about 20 minutes ago. They'll bring her back here within the hour to execute a search warrant and collect evidence." Iris nodded slowly. "So I'll see her after all." "You don't have to. You can stay up here. I can—" No." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I want to be there." We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I could see the Pacific stretching out endlessly, the same view we had looked at together for 20 years since we bought this house. "When did you tell me?" Iris asked. "About her. About what she was planning." I thought back. 3 weeks ago. Right after Conrad confirmed the arsenic in the tea samples. 3 weeks. She smiled faintly. I'd already stopped drinking it by then. "I know. That's what Dr. Reyes said. Your instincts saved you before I even knew you were in danger." Iris turned to look at me finally. "I'm glad you told me. That you trusted me with the truth instead of just protecting me from it. You deserved to know. It was your life she was trying to take. And you've spent 6 months building the case to make sure she could never do this to anyone else." She reached over and took my hand. "Do you remember the apartment on Figueroa Street?" The question caught me off guard. Of course. The heater didn't work. The roof leaked. We had one window that looked out at a brick wall. Her eyes were distant, remembering. But I looked at those 4 walls and thought it was the most beautiful home I'd ever seen. "Do you know why?" Because it was ours," I said. "Because we built it together. Every house after that, 6 moves in 8 years, we built them all together. This place, this estate, $12 million of California real estate, it's beautiful. But it's beautiful because it's ours. Because we earned it. Because every brick and every window represents a choice we made together." She squeezed my hand. "That's what Jade never understood." Iris continued. "She saw a house worth stealing. We saw a home worth protecting. Love isn't the opposite of revenge. Sometimes it's the reason." At 4:30 p.m. we heard the cars pulling up the driveway. I stood and looked out the window. 2 unmarked FBI vehicles, Jade visible in the back seat of the first one, hands restrained behind her. She looked disheveled, her carefully styled hair coming loose, her designer clothes wrinkled from the arrest. "They're here," I said. Iris stood and smoothed her blouse. "Then let's go down." We walked downstairs together. Landon was already in the foyer, pale but steady, having been called back from Marcus Fletcher's office. He looked at us as we descended, a question in his eyes. "She's here," I said simply. The front door opened. 2 FBI agents entered first, then Jade between them, her hands cuffed in front of her now, instead of behind. She walked with her head high, despite everything, some core of dignity holding her upright, even in handcuffs. She looked around the foyer, the marble floors, the curved staircase, the chandelier that had probably been part of her mental inventory from the first time she saw it. Then her eyes found Iris standing beside me at the bottom of the stairs. For a long moment, they looked at each other. Jade, the predator, who had tried to poison her way into this house. Iris, the woman who had taught Shakespeare for 35 years and knew exactly how villain stories ended. Iris didn't look away, didn't flinch. Just held Jade's gaze with the steady certainty of someone who had survived what she was never supposed to survive. Jade's composure cracked just for a second. Something that might have been shame or recognition, or simply the acknowledgement that she had lost. Then Jade turned to me. "You planned all of this." she said. Not a question. A statement. Before the wedding, before Landon ever proposed, you knew who I was, and you let it all happen anyway. Yes, I said, I did. The ring with the GPS tracker, the security cameras, the financial forensics, Conrad monitoring every move I made. She took a breath. 6 months of letting me think I was winning. 6 months of letting you prove exactly who you were. For the first time in 8 months, maybe in 40 years, Jade looked small. Not defeated exactly, but no longer larger than life. Just a woman in handcuffs standing in a house she would never own, facing a family she had failed to destroy. The arsenic, she said quietly. How long did you know? Conrad confirmed it 3 months ago. I let you keep serving it because I knew Iris would figure it out on her own. And she did. She stopped drinking the tea 3 weeks before we even had the lab results. Jade's eyes went to Iris again. You knew. Both of you knew, and you just watched me. As we documented you, I corrected. Every crime, every lie, every move, so that when the FBI arrested you, there would be no possibility of escape. No clever lawyer, no plea deal, no disappearing to find another victim, just justice. One of the FBI agents stepped forward. We need to execute the search warrant now. Jade didn't move. She was still looking at me, and for the first time I saw something in her expression that wasn't calculation or charm or manipulation. It was respect. You earned this, she said softly. I've run cons for 20 years, and no one has ever. You earned this. The agents started to lead her toward the study, where they would collect evidence catalog documents, build the final pieces of the federal case. Jade paused at the threshold and looked back one final time. Tell me, she said, was any of it real? I met her eyes across 8 months of deception and 40 years of marriage to the woman standing beside me. No, I said simply. None of it was real. Not for me. Those were the last words I spoke to her before Agent Bradley stepped forward and led her toward the study to collect evidence. I didn't watch her go. 40 minutes later, Agent Bradley, a man who told me he'd spent 22 years with the Bureau, closed the evidence case with a decisive snap and looked at me. One of the cleanest cases I've seen in my entire career, he said. The documentation, the timeline, the witness statements, it's all airtight. She won't see daylight for decades. He shook my hand, collected the last of his team's equipment, and left. The house fell quiet. I found Iris and Landon in the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa, like two people who weren't sure how to be in the same space anymore. I sat in the chair across from them. Landon looked at his hands for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom. Iris reached across the sofa and took his hand. You were deceived by someone very skilled at deceiving Landon. Your father has had 40 years of practice learning not to be. You had 8 months. I should have seen it. Should have questioned. You did question it, I said quietly. Didn't you? Landon looked up at me surprised. When did you first suspect something was wrong? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. 3 months ago. Celeste insisted I invest company money in one of Vance's ventures. A real estate fund that didn't quite add up when I looked at the numbers. I raised concerns, and she got cold. Threatening almost. Said if I loved her, I would trust her judgment. He shook his head. Then I knew something felt wrong. But I wanted her approval so badly. Wanted to believe I had found someone who loved me for me, not for the family money or the company position. So I ignored the instinct. That's what predators do, Iris said softly. They make you want something so badly that you ignore your own better judgment. It's not weakness, Landon. It's being human. Why didn't you tell me? Landon looked at me. When you first found out who she was, why didn't you just tell me? Would you have believed me? He thought about that. No, he admitted finally. I would have thought you were trying to control my life, trying to keep me from being happy. I would have married her anyway, probably faster, just to prove you wrong. I know. That's why I let it happen. Because you needed to see it yourself. I could have chased her away, but then she would have found another victim, another family. And you would have spent years resenting me for interfering. I leaned forward. Not this way, you saw exactly who she was. You'll never make this mistake again. And Jade Vaughn will never hurt another person. The sound of movement in the foyer made us all turn. Jade stood there still in handcuffs, flanked by 2 FBI agents. Agent Bradley stepped forward. She's requested 5 minutes to speak with the family before transport, he said. We can allow it under supervision if you're willing. I looked at Iris. She nodded. 5 minutes, I said. Jade walked into the living room, her steps careful, measured. She looked at each of us, Landon, me, and finally Iris. How do you forgive someone who kneels before you, not asking for forgiveness, but for permission to stop running? Then Jade did something I never expected. She lowered herself to her knees in front of Iris, bowing her head. I've been running since I was 19 years old, she said, her voice raw. Conning people, stealing, lying, moving from place to place before anyone could catch me. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything else. Iris looked down at her, expression unreadable. I tried to poison you, Jade continued. I tried to steal your home. I tried to kill your son for insurance money. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I needed to say that I don't know how to stop. The room was absolutely silent. Iris's voice, when she finally spoke, was gentle but firm. Then today you stop. Jade looked up at her, tears on her face for the first time since I had met her. Real tears, I thought. Not manipulation. Just exhaustion. I spent 35 years teaching teenagers, Iris said. I taught them about consequences, about choices, about how every story ends when you keep making the same mistakes. You chose this path, Jade. Every victim, every lie, every crime. And now you face the consequences. She didn't offer her hand. Didn't help Jade stand. Just held her gaze with absolute certainty. But you can stop. Today, right now. You stop running, you face what you've done, and you serve your time. That's the only way this ends. Jade stood slowly, the agents helping her to her feet. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Not the confident con artist who had walked into our lives 8 months ago. Just a woman who had spent 20 years running and had finally been caught. She turned to me as the agents prepared to take her out. Your wife is a remarkable woman, she said quietly. It wasn't charm, wasn't manipulation. Just a simple statement of truth, maybe the first genuinely honest thing she had said in 8 months of marriage to my son, 6 months of me watching her, 40 years of running from one con to the next. She looked at Iris one more time. I thought I could beat you. Beat both of you. Take everything you built and make it mine. But I never understood what you had. Not really. No one, I said. You didn't. The agents led her toward the front door. Jade stopped at the threshold and turned back. Oh, you built something real, she said to me one last time, quietly enough that only I could hear. I never understood what that meant until today. She paused at the threshold, one last look over her shoulder. Take care of each other. It was the only honest thing she had ever said to me. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I raised my hand before the officers reached the front door, and they paused, Jade between them in handcuffs. Agent Bradley looked at me questioningly. One moment, I said. There's something that needs to be said. I stepped forward, not close enough to threaten, just present. Iris stood beside me. Landon remained by the stairs, watching. And when you raised your hand against my wife this morning, I said, looking directly at Jade, You believed she was alone, just a retired school teacher, 65 years old, easy to dismiss, easy to intimidate, easy to poison slowly until she signed away everything we built together. Jade's face was unreadable. But she has never been alone, I continued. Not for 42 years. Not for a single day of our marriage. And when you decided that a woman who devoted her life to teaching children was worth less than the house she lived in, you made your fatal miscalculation. I glanced at Iris, then back at Jade. Not the fraud, not the identity theft, not even the arsenic. Your fatal mistake was the disrespect, the belief that Iris Garfield could be dismissed, manipulated, erased. Because the moment you showed me that disrespect, the moment you raised your hand against her, you proved everything I had suspected for 6 months. You proved you were exactly who Conrad's investigation said you were. I took a breath. Every crime you committed today, the assault, the attempted theft, the poisoning, the conspiracy to murder my son, I knew you would commit them. Because I've spent 6 months studying you, Jade Vaughn, your patterns, your methods, your tells. I knew you would lose control when Iris refused to sign. I knew you would try to flee when the walls closed in. I knew you would attempt every predictable move in your playbook. I stepped back beside Iris, and I let you. Because the FBI needed to see it, the DA needed to document it, and most importantly, my son needed to witness who you really were, not who I told him you were. Justice isn't blind, it just has patience. You're done, I said quietly. Not just for what you did to my family, but for Howard Finch, for Marcus Delray, for every victim whose life you destroyed before you walked into ours. This time, there's no running, no new identity, no escape. Jade looked at me for a long moment. Then surprisingly, she nodded. I underestimated you, she said. Both of you. That won't happen again. No, I agreed. It won't. Agent Bradley stepped forward. We need to go now. I watched them take her out. Watched her walk through the front door of the house she had tried to steal, in handcuffs heading toward federal detention, and a trial that would end with decades in prison. The door closed. This time it stayed closed. At 5:30, I retreated to my study alone. Iris was with Dr. Reyes finalizing medical documentation for the prosecutor. Landon was on the phone with Marcus Fletcher answering follow-up questions for his witness statement. I sat at my desk in the quiet processing what had just happened. 6 months of planning. Thousands of hours of surveillance. The coordination of law enforcement across 3 states. All of it leading to this single day. Plan Omega, the end. I had named it that 6 months before Landon's wedding. Conrad and I had been sitting in this study reviewing the preliminary investigation results, confirming that the woman my son planned to marry was a federal fugitive named Jade Vaughn. What do you want to call this operation? Conrad had asked. Omega, I said immediately. Why Omega? Because it's the last letter of the Greek alphabet. The end. I'm naming it that because I already know how this will end. I just need her to prove it herself. You want to know when the plan really started. The punch this morning, Jade hitting Iris when she refused to sign, wasn't the trigger for Plan Omega. It was the final piece of physical evidence that Vance's confession had confirmed was missing. The visible injury that would justify the emergency TRO, the immediate arrest, the federal charges that couldn't be plea bargained away. I had built the trap, knowing she would step into it. Knowing that when Iris refused to surrender our home, Jade would lose control. Knowing that her need to dominate, to win, to take what she wanted, would override her caution. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a photograph I had kept there for 8 months. The wedding photo. Landon and Celeste, no Landon and Jade standing at the altar, smiling, promising to love and cherish. But it wasn't the couple I was looking at. In the background, barely visible behind the officiant, was a figure I had placed there deliberately. Conrad Hale. Attending the wedding as a guest, positioned perfectly to photograph attendees, to document Vance's behavior, to begin the surveillance that would eventually bring Jade down. He'd been there from the beginning. Not just 6 months of investigation, but from the wedding day itself. From the moment I confirmed who Jade was, Conrad had been documenting, watching, building the case piece by piece. The entire 8-month marriage had been orchestrated. Not by Jade targeting my son, but by me allowing her to believe she was winning while I built the evidence that would destroy her. I set the wedding photo on my desk. Jade in white, Landon in his tuxedo, smiling and hopeful. Conrad a blur in the background, barely noticeable unless you knew to look for him. 40 years of my life compressed into one image, the family I had protected, the son I had taught a brutal lesson, and the investigator who had helped me ensure Jade Vaughn would never hurt anyone again. My phone rang. I checked the caller ID. Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. I answered. Preston Garfield? Mr. Garfield, this is Assistant DA Morrison. I wanted to update you on the arraignment schedule. Miss Vaughn will appear before a federal judge tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Given the flight risk and the severity of charges, we'll be requesting detention without bail. Thank you for the call. We'll need you and your wife to be available for testimony when the trial begins, probably in 3 to 4 months. We'll be there. I hung up and looked at the photograph again. The legal machinery was beginning its work. But for now, the house was ours again. The house fell silent at 6 o'clock when the last FBI vehicle pulled away, leaving only the 3 of us standing in the foyer, me, Iris, and Landon. We stood there for a moment, not quite sure what to do with the silence. For 8 months, this house had been a stage for Jade's performance. Before that, 42 years of my life with Iris building something real. And now, finally, it was just us. I'm hungry, Landon said quietly. We moved to the small kitchen, not the grand dining room where Jade had orchestrated her carefully planned meals, but the kitchen where Iris had always done the real cooking. The space where she made breakfast on Saturday mornings, where we had eaten countless simple dinners over 4 decades. Landon opened the refrigerator without being asked and started pulling out vegetables. Iris watched him for a moment, then moved to the cabinet for olive oil and spices. I'll make the salad, Landon said. It was the first time in 6 months I had seen him move freely in this kitchen. When Jade was here, she had orchestrated everything, where people sat, what they ate, how the conversation flowed. Landon had been a puppet in his own life. Now he was chopping tomatoes, his movements unpracticed, but genuine. Your father likes extra pepper, Iris said softly, handing him the grinder. Landon paused mid-chop. I know, I forgot I knew that. You forgot a lot of things, Iris said gently. That's what happens when someone controls you. You forget who you were before them. How do I get it back? One day at a time. She touched his shoulder. The therapy helps. I looked up from where I was setting the table. Therapy, Landon nodded. Mom set it up 3 weeks ago, after you told us about the plan. She said I would need help processing everything when it ended, even if I didn't realize it yet. I looked at Iris. She met my eyes with that steady gaze that had seen me through 42 years. He needed to be prepared, she said simply. Not just for Jade's arrest, for understanding what he'd been through, for forgiving himself. This was what I had paid for. Not revenge. Not seeing Jade in handcuffs or watching her empire collapse. This moment. My son chopping vegetables in a kitchen, learning to be himself again. My wife who thought 3 steps ahead even when she was being poisoned. A family that was finally genuinely safe. Freedom has a price tag, and I had paid it gladly. We ate dinner together in the small kitchen. Simple food, quiet conversation. Landon asked about the arraignment tomorrow, and I told him he didn't need to be there if he didn't want to. Iris talked about returning to substitute teaching in the spring, how she missed her students. It was the most normal evening we had spent in 8 months. At 7 o'clock, I excused myself to the study. Conrad called right on schedule. Everything's wrapped and ready for the prosecution, he said. Agent Bradley confirmed all evidence is logged and chain of custody is clean. The DA has Vance's confession, Landon's witness statement, Dr. Reyes's medical affidavit, and 6 months of surveillance documentation. It's the most thorough case file I've ever delivered. Thank you, Conrad. There's one more item we need to discuss. He paused. Do you want to know what Plan Omega cost you? I hadn't asked. Hadn't wanted to know during the operation. But now with everything finished, I was curious. Tell me. I'm sending the final invoice to your email right now. My phone buzzed. I opened the email, scanned down to the bottom line, and felt my breath catch. $847,312. 6 months of 24-hour surveillance. Forensic accounting across 3 states. Legal coordination. The GPS ring. Private laboratory testing. Witness protection for Vance's confession. Conrad's team working around the clock to document every move Jade made. $800,000 to catch one woman. I forwarded the invoice to my accountant with a 2-word instruction. Approve immediately. I told Conrad. You didn't even hesitate. Who should I have? You might think $800,000 is too much to pay for justice. You might think I should have just called the police the day I confirmed Jade's identity, let the system handle it, saved the money. But Howard Finch had called the police. So had Marcus Delray. And Jade had disappeared, both times found new victims, destroyed new lives. The system had failed twice because it couldn't move fast enough, couldn't build cases strong enough, couldn't anticipate a predator who had spent 20 years learning how to run. I paid $800,000 to make sure she would never run again. To make sure the evidence was so overwhelming that no lawyer could create reasonable doubt. To make sure that when my son faced his wife in court, he would have the truth documented and irrefutable. I paid for certainty, and I would pay it again. Was it worth it? Conrad asked quietly. I looked out the study door. Through it, I could see into the kitchen, where Landon and Iris were cleaning dishes together, talking softly about something I couldn't hear. My son was laughing, actually laughing, at something his mother said. 6 months ago, Landon had been a hollow man, controlled by blackmail and fear. Iris had been slowly dying from poison in her morning tea. This house had been a hunting ground, where Jade Vaughn stalked her prey. Now my son was learning to laugh again. My wife was healthy and safe. The predator was in federal custody awaiting trial. You tell me, I said. Conrad's laugh came through the phone, warm and tired. Get some sleep, old man, when he said. You've earned it. I hung up and sat in the quiet study. The house around me felt different now. Lighter. Like something heavy had been lifted from the walls themselves. But there was one more thing I needed to do before this day could end. The one thing I needed to do was simple. I walked upstairs, found Iris reading in bed, and sat beside her. No words. Just my hand in hers, sitting in the quiet house that was finally truly ours. That was all. The judge denied bail 7 days after Jade's arrest. Flight risk, he ruled, compounded by the active federal warrant and evidence of prior disappearances in Nevada and Florida. Jade Vaughn would await trial in federal detention. The machinery of justice moved slower than revenge, but more permanently. Within 72 hours, a grand jury returned indictments on 17 counts: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault, attempted poisoning, and a list of federal charges that Marcus Fletcher walked me through over the phone. Each count carried its own sentence. Combined, Jade was looking at decades. Vance Dalton took the plea deal. 4 years in federal prison, 2 years supervised probation, full cooperation, and testimony. The federal prosecutor told me it was a good deal. Vance's testimony would seal the case against Jade, eliminate any possibility of reasonable doubt. I approved it. Justice for Vance mattered less than certainty for Jade. Landon's marriage was declared legally voidable fraud in the inducement, Marcus explained. Celeste Ashford had never legally existed. Jade Vaughn had married my son under a false identity. The marriage in the eyes of California law had never been real. The forensic accounting review came back clean. Every asset in my name, every property in the Garfield Group portfolio, completely separate from anything Jade had touched. The prosecutor told Marcus it was the cleanest estate documentation she had seen in 20 years of fraud cases. 2 weeks after the arrest, Landon came home in the early evening and found me in the study. "I filed it today," he said quietly. "The annulment." "How do you feel?" "Lighter." He sat in the chair across from my desk. "Marcus said it should be finalized within 90 days. After that, it's like it never happened." "Legally, yes, but you'll remember." "I know." He nodded slowly. "That's probably good. I need to remember. Need to make sure I never ignore my instincts again." We sat quietly for a moment. Then Landon asked, "The apartment on Figueroa Street, the one you and Mom first lived in, is it still standing?" "Yes." "Why?" "I want to see it sometime." He wasn't asking about the Pacific Palisades estate, the culmination of 40 years of success. He was asking about a fourth-floor walk-up with a broken heater and a view of a brick wall. "I'll drive," I said. That Saturday, the three of us headed east through Los Angeles. The neighborhoods getting older, the buildings smaller, the signs shifting from English to Spanish and back again. Figueroa Street looked exactly as I remembered. Same structure, different paint. 4 stories, narrow windows, fire escape zigzagging down the front. "That one," I said. "4th-floor corner unit." We stood on the sidewalk looking up. "This is where you started?" Landon asked. "This is where we started," Iris corrected. "This is where we became us." Landon stared at the 4th-floor windows. "What was it like?" 400 square feet, I said. "Broken heater, roof that leaked. Your mother walked 3 miles to school every morning to save gas money." "But it was ours," Iris said. "We had almost nothing. But we had each other. And we had hope." Landon was quiet, looking up at that corner window. "Jade wanted the estate," he said finally. "The money, the status, the end result. She never understood how you got there. She never cared about the broken heater and the hope." "No," I said. "She didn't." He turned to face us both. "Tell me from the beginning." We told him. Standing on Figueroa Street, we told Landon about the broken heater and the hope about building something from nothing, about 42 years of choosing each other every single day. 4 weeks later, the verdict came down on January 8, 2025, in a downtown Los Angeles courtroom I never entered. Jade Vaughn was convicted on all counts: wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit murder, aggravated assault. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning unanimous verdicts on 17 separate charges. The judge sentenced her 3 days later. I wasn't there for that either. Marcus Fletcher attended on our behalf and called me afterward with the details. 38 years. Federal prison consecutive sentences stacked one after another. The judge had looked at Jade's history, the victims in Nevada and Florida, the decades of running cons, the clear pattern of predatory behavior, and decided that concurrent sentences weren't sufficient. Each crime deserved its own punishment. Marcus told me the prosecutors had specifically requested consecutive sentencing, citing the comprehensive documentation Conrad and I had provided. Every victim identified. every dollar traced, every pattern established. The evidence was so thorough that the judge had no discretion to show mercy. 38 years meant Jade Vaughn would be 72 when released, assuming good behavior. More likely, 75 or 80 if Florida decided to extradite her for Howard Finch's case, which they were considering. All of her seized assets, what little remained after legal fees, went into a victim restitution fund. Howard Finch's children would receive compensation. Marcus Delray's estate would be partially restored. The money wouldn't undo the damage, but it was something. I did not go to the courthouse. Neither did Iris. Some endings don't require witnesses. They just require closure. That closure came on a quiet January morning in our kitchen 3 weeks after the sentencing. Landon had moved back home temporarily during his recovery. His therapist had suggested it being around family, being in a safe space while he processed everything that had happened. Iris and I had offered immediately, and he'd accepted. I came downstairs at 7:30 to find him already in the kitchen cooking breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air. Landon stood at the stove, concentrating on scrambled eggs, moving with the careful attention of someone learning to do simple things again. This was the morning I had imagined for 6 months. Not Jade in handcuffs. Not the verdict or the sentencing or watching her world collapse. This. My son cooking breakfast in a safe kitchen. Ordinary. Real. Hours. Iris sat at the table reading a book, a cup of tea beside her. Not the special blend Jade had given her. Just regular tea from the grocery store prepared by her own hands, drunk without fear. I poured myself coffee and sat down across from her. "Are you still watching?" Iris asked without looking up from her book. She meant the doorways, the windows, the patterns of movement through the house. The hypervigilance I had maintained for 6 months while Jade lived here. "Always," I said, "but differently now." She smiled and turned a page. Landon brought plates to the table, eggs, bacon toast. He had even remembered to add extra pepper to mine the way I liked it. Small details coming back. Pieces of himself he had forgotten while Jade controlled every aspect of his life. We ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Through the kitchen window, I could see the Pacific stretching out endlessly under the January sky. The Christmas lights were still up on the neighbor's house, twinkling faintly in the morning sun. You might think revenge ends with a verdict. It doesn't. It ends with breakfast. With your son cooking eggs without fear. With your wife drinking tea without wondering if it will kill her. With ordinary mornings in a house that's finally safe. "I've been thinking," Landon said, setting down his fork. "About work, about the company." I waited. "I want to go back," he continued. "But not the way it was before. Not just showing up and managing the divisions you assigned me. I want to actually learn the business. From you. The way you built it, not just the way you're running it now." He met my eyes across the table, steady and clear. "I want to understand what you did. Not just the real estate part, but how you read people. How you know when someone is lying. How you protected Mom and me even when I couldn't see the danger. I want to learn that." Iris reached over and squeezed my hand. "We'll start slow," I said. "When you're ready, there's no rush." "I'm ready," Landon said. "I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. That person was weak, naive, too trusting. But I'm not asking you to fix that for me. I'm asking you to teach me how to fix it myself." This wasn't about reclaiming his old life. His old life had been built on the assumption that the world was fundamentally safe, that people were fundamentally good, that wealth insulated you from danger. He had learned brutally that none of those things were true. Now he wanted to build something new. Not the life of a man who had been protected from every threat. The life of a man who had survived one. "Monday morning," I said. "We'll start with the first property I ever bought. The duplex in East LA. I'll show you the original paperwork, the inspection reports, the financing structure. We'll work our way forward from there. Landon nodded. Thank you. You don't need to thank me for teaching you what I should have taught you years ago. Yes, he said, I do. He looked at me across the kitchen table, steady and clear-eyed, for the first time in months. My son was ready to begin again, and so I realized the morning Iris told me she was going back to teaching. We were sitting on the patio with coffee, watching January sunlight filter through the oak trees. She'd been quiet for days, not the hollow silence of those autumn months, but something deeper, more deliberate. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a certainty I hadn't heard in over a year. I called Dean Morrison yesterday, she said. Pasadena Community College. They have an opening in the English department for spring semester. I set down my cup slowly. And I start Monday. She turned to look at me, and for the first time since October 2023, I saw the woman I'd married 43 years ago, not the ghost Jade had tried to create, but the teacher who'd believed in second chapters and hard-won transformations. I've been someone's victim long enough. It's time to be myself again. You're ready? I asked. She smiled, and it reached her eyes. I don't know, but I'm willing to find out. That afternoon, Conrad's letter arrived. A single-page cream envelope, his law firm's logo in the corner. Preston, the Broward County State Attorney, has reopened the Howard Finch case. Your testimony and our forensic accounting established probable cause. They're pursuing charges related to his poisoning, a separate investigation your evidence helped unlock. Howard's case may have had other players Jade never disclosed, and Florida intends to find out. Howard's daughter called me yesterday. She said her father spent his last months believing he'd been a fool. Now she knows he was a victim. It won't bring him back, but it gives his death a different meaning. Some cases close. Some cases echo. Yours in friendship, Conrad. I set the letter on my desk, beside the photograph of Iris and me at Lake Tahoe, the one from 1985. Howard Finch, 71 years old, dead from what his doctors called complications from diabetes. He'd never know justice was coming, but his daughter would. Maybe that was enough. An hour later, Landon found me at the window with Conrad's letter still in my hand. You okay? He asked. Florida case. They're moving forward. He crossed the room slowly, carrying a small box, the kind jewelers use for watches. He held it out without a word. Inside was my father's vintage Omega, the one I'd worn every day until 2019 when the mechanism finally gave out. I'd put it in a drawer and forgotten it existed. But someone hadn't forgotten. The watch gleamed its crystal, polished its second hand, sweeping smoothly around the ivory face like time itself had been forgiven. I found it last month, Landon said. Took it to a watchmaker in Beverly Hills. He said it just needed someone willing to wind it again. I lifted it from the box, the same familiar weight my father had pressed into my hand, the day he told me a man's legacy wasn't what he owned, but what he protected. You gave me a second chance, Landon said, his voice cracking just slightly. When I didn't deserve one. You could have walked away. You didn't. I fastened the watch around my wrist. It settled into place like muscle memory. You're my son, I said. That doesn't come with conditions. Outside, I could hear Iris moving through the garden, humming something I didn't recognize, a tune from her teaching days maybe, or just the sound of someone remembering how to sing. That evening, the three of us sat together in the dining room, where Jade had once presided over carefully staged performances. The table was smaller now. We'd replaced the 12-seater with something more intimate, and the light was softer. When Iris reached across and squeezed my hand, I felt the watch press against my skin like a promise. Some things once broken cannot be repaired. But some things, the right things, the things worth fighting for, they only needed someone willing to wind them again. And to you listening to my story, remember this. The people who look perfect on the surface are sometimes the ones hiding the darkest secrets. If I'm honest, I should have trusted my instincts sooner. For months I saw the signs, the way Jade isolated my son, the timing of Iris's illness, the convenient answers that felt too rehearsed. But I wanted to believe the best. I wanted my son's happiness more than I wanted the truth. Don't make my mistake. When something feels wrong, investigate. When someone you love is in danger, act. Waiting for proof can cost you everything. This journey taught me that family justice isn't about revenge. It's about protection. It's about standing between the people you love and the people who would destroy them, even when that means exposing uncomfortable truths. Stories like mine, what some might call dad's revenge stories, aren't really about vengeance. They're lessons in what happens when you refuse to look away. I believe God put me through this trial to show me that real family justice means making the hard choice to act, even when everyone around you thinks you're wrong. These dad's revenge stories you hear, they're not fairy tales. They're reminders that sometimes protecting your family means becoming the villain in someone else's story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think I did the right thing, or should I have stayed silent and let it play out? Comment below and let me know. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want more real stories about standing up for what's right, subscribe to Wise Revenge, because sometimes the wisest revenge is simply refusing to let injustice win. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time and attention mean more than you know. One last note. While the core truth of this story is real, some details have been adjusted or recreated for storytelling and privacy. What matters most is the lesson, and I hope it stays with you.